To say that it was inevitable maybe doesn't do it justice, but certainly Newcastle fans are now reeling with the confirmation that Rafa Benitez will not be extending his contract in a summer of turmoil under Mike Ashley at Newcastle United. Ale, first of all, your reaction on Benitez deciding that 3 years is enough for him?
Not surprised. This has felt an unstoppable force for the last, I would say, 3 years. Because every summer we come to this point to where there's conversation. Is there going to be investment in the team? What happens with the ownership? Do we have that sorted out? And if we don't, what does that happen with the targets that we're going to go after as players? And so then the Premier season comes around, and what ends up happening is this very same story every year where Newcastle does just enough to stay in the Premier League. And Benitez complains of the fact that there are no players and that he cannot do much more than what they're doing. And then the fans, I think, are positive on Benitez in the sense that Newcastle is still in the Premier League and that they find themselves in a position in which they avoid relegation. That seems to be a victory. And now we come to the summer, and then again it's the same conversation. It's been like that for the last 3 years. And so eventually I think something had to give, and Benitez probably said, you know what, I'm gone. See you guys later.
Were Newcastle fortunate to have him, really? Because it's been now 12 years under Ashley. Turnover of managers, huge. They finished once, I think, above 10th in the division. Haven't made any waves in the cup competitions. It's just been stagnation, but it's really seemed like he's been putting off the inevitability of another relegation. Is it a foregone conclusion that they get relegated, whoever comes in, without the investment?
Well, no, I don't think so, because that doesn't just depend on them. It also depends on the teams that are below them, and that could potentially be shoo-ins for relegation regardless. But I do think that you are losing out on a manager of tremendous experience, of tremendous success, and that got the very best of the players that were available to him. And that is the definition of your job as a manager, and that is to maximize the potential of what you have in front of you. And Newcastle, without having been all that entertaining to watch, without having been all that pretty or sexy or any of those things, they were effective to some degree. They were efficient to some degree. They scored enough goals, didn't give up as many as they should have. And then they found themselves in a position where they say, you know what, everybody else fight for relegation. We're just going to get our heads above water, and that's about it. Not much more than that. It's not like they were thriving, but they were doing enough. Maybe the difference is Benitez, and to your point, maybe the guy that comes in doesn't quite have that extra little bit that allows Newcastle to just fight out relegation. I just don't think the reality changes much because, well, the reality of the club hasn't changed much. And until that changes and until that gets sorted out and fully executed, and then they move on in a different direction in terms of the ownership, then you're still going to find these issues. And yes, Newcastle will be there in the conversation come around March and looking to get some points and needing some points. Do we beat this team? Do we tie against this team? If we get a result against them, then we're safe. We get to 40 points. Now we can breathe easy. That's what Newcastle has been, and I think it's what they will continue to be.
There's been so many rumours about takeovers during the period of Ashley's ownership, but now obviously circulating around this figure, Sheikh Khalid of Abu Dhabi. Now, whether this goes ahead may well determine what the future lies for the manager coming in, but this is the latest odds that we have of those managers who are being linked. Are these names players or managers that you would see as being realistic? Would they be realistic only under the terms of a new owner? What do you think could be achieved for Newcastle? Let's see Alan Pardew being linked back there as well. It was he who finished fifth with Newcastle. Now one performance above the top 10 during the Ashley era. So I don't know if that inspires you. Would it inspire the fans?
Well, any of these names on this list would have to have an assurance that as to what the direction of the club is. None of these guys would jump into a job knowing, unless there is a desperation aspect to it, unless there's, look, this is my last opportunity to get on this merry-go-round, and if I don't get on right now, then I have no chance. But none of those guys, I would suggest, would just get in everything being equal, just get onto this job without knowing what the direction of the club is, and who's making the decisions, and what is the plan, and what is the structure, and how are we going to achieve the plans that are in place? And how do those plans match what I want to do as a manager? Unless, as I said, unless you're desperate for an opportunity, I don't see how you jump on it without really knowing what's going on. And that's why I said earlier, you have to figure out the structure of the club first, and the ownership, and all those issues. And then once you do that, you can make an informed decision. And that's what you would want to do as a club anyways. Because if not, you got people making decisions that are not going to be in charge, and then the guy that comes in was not hired by the people that were in charge at the time. It's taking a step forward to take 2 steps back. And sadly, for Newcastle fans, at times, that's been the story for this club for so many years now.
And a final word on Benitez, now 59 years old. He came from Real Madrid. It wasn't the most successful reunion for him back at the club where he, of course, started. But where do you see his future? There's talk of China. Is he finished at the top level?
Well, I think if China comes knocking, they're going to come knocking at a high price. At a very high price. And the rumors of the numbers out there are just crazy. And if that's what they're willing to pay him to go and coach a team for a year or two, there are worse things to do when you're 60 years old. And to be quite honest, I don't think that he's struggling financially anyways. He has been a top manager for a long time. But if he wanted to go on that route for what they call a new challenge equals he's going to get paid a whole lot of money, well, you take it if you're Benitez. What does it matter at this point if people think that you're at the top or not the top or best manager of the world, not best manager of the world? The guy has achieved anything that he needed to achieve. It's time to move on.
Okay, so the Benitez era ends at St James's Park. And as for Newcastle fans, they're obviously reeling from that news, as we mentioned, but so much of what the future holds determined around Mike Ashley's ownership and plans for the club. Is he going to stay? Is it going to be more treading water financially within the Premier League? Or are Newcastle about to take a big step under new ownership?